begin a period of meditation. For people who have meditated before, of course, this is just doing something you've done before. And if you are a beginner to the practice and it feels quite new, and the interesting thing is that it's always new, whether you've done it for the last 40 years or you're just on your second week of practicing meditation, it's always new. And it's reviving in an honest way that freshness of mind, that freshness of attention, which is part of what is a great aid in developing the practice, beginning again, as they say. So often that begins with just looking over the body, feeling the spine, and making it a little more erect, supporting that sense of being alert. And I often will recommend that people bring their attention to their head, their face, since so much is going on in the mobile musculature of the face as we present ourselves to the world, as we frown and bring cheer and query something. All of these things are expressed in the face. And it's very interesting how when we actually bring some gentle attention to the face, to the muscles around the mouth, around the eyes, forehead, wherever, that doing so with that unhurried sense of just looking, just watching, just observing, that in itself is often enough to bring a kind of relaxed state to those muscles, softens them. Also the chest, noticing the breathing. Muscles around the neck, the shoulders. Softening the belly. Some instructions never get old, and one is simply the reminder that the first foundation of mindfulness is the body. So softening the body, relaxing into the sitting posture will be a great support to the mindfulness. The simple awareness from one moment to the next of what's arising in the mind and in the heart. Mm. I neglected to mention to, especially to the local people, that Sundays we have meditations now, Sunday mornings at the monastery. Start at 9:30 in the morning. And I think partly because of my, I've done a few of these, and we don't do any chanting in them. So I've become a little bit used to that. And so I launched right into meditation without doing the chanting that I'd already arranged to do. So we can chant now. I think we're going to do Iti Piso to begin with.
Request a Dhamma talk.
Okay, okay. We're going to chant first. We'll just do the Pali, and I've tripped us up. That was on me. My bad, as we say these days. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vicha charana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manusanang buddho bhagavati svakato bhagavata dhammo Sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayiko pachatang veditabo vinyuhiti supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Samichi patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Yadidang chattari purisa yugani atta purisa pukala Esa bhagavato savaka sangho Ahunayo pahunayo Dakinayo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Bunya Ketang Lokasati. And if we could maybe just chant the English with Buddha's words on loving kindness. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Brahma Chaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjaliha Nadivaravaya Chata Santi Dasata Parajaka Jatika Dese Tudama Anukampi Mampajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, it's good to be with you all again. Sort of kind of prompted to speak a little tonight about the precepts. I don't know that I'm reminded a little bit because last night was an Aposita night here, and on the full and new moons, we also have the lay people who are visiting us, the stewards and whoever else is visiting us. We have them take their precepts again. In that case, the 8 precepts since they're living at the monastery. So I'm thinking about matters of precepts. And of course, yesterday being an Aposita, the monks and the Samanera here all did our own precepts as well, with the monks having the Patimokkha chanted. So they are these are things that in monastic life are rather near and dear to us, since they govern our behavior and are meant to be a source of regular reflection, along with other things. But they are a source of regular reflection. And as you know, we have many guidelines that curb our actions in body, speech, and mind. Curb and also nurture actions in body, speech, and mind in a wholesome direction, but curb any impulses we might have to act in selfish or unthoughtful ways. And in monasteries, at least, or whenever monks are invited to occasions like this, sometimes they will talk about precepts because it's quite customary for formal occasions for the lay people gathered to request precepts, and then sometimes the monk will offer some reflections on what the precepts mean. Not everyone is used to having is not used to perhaps reciting precepts or thinking very clearly about them, and so monks are often asked to or prompted in other ways to reflect on what the precepts refer to, what taking refuge refers to, and so forth. I've also been reading, just really kind of flipping through a lovely book by Ajahn Pavaro, quite recent one by Ajahn Pavaro and Joseph Capel, formerly Ajahn Pavaro. And it's the transcripts from a retreat that they gave at Amaravati a few years ago. So it's interesting to read some of their reflections on these matters as well. I think in just speaking kind of to the Western context, it's sometimes observed that when Buddhism, where at least I would say when Theravada first came, or even more properly put, the kind of mindfulness tradition first came to America, the early teachers in the States at in the Massachusetts Center often, or for a number of years at least, kind of avoided talking about precepts because their assessment of the people coming was that speaking about things you couldn't do was just a little bit too much for the folks who were interested in meditating at that time. Of course, all of that changed as things do. Populous meditators themselves have matured. There's a kind of spiritual maturation which occurs just as other forms of maturation are natural to us. And so all of that has changed, thankfully. But, you know, one can sort of understand where they were coming from at that time, say in the early 70s. Probably to a large extent coming out of a kind of Judeo-Christian ethos where people had moved away. Many people coming into meditation communities had moved away for various reasons from the kind of thou shalt not kind of traditions that they had been brought up with. So perhaps it was understood that any talk about morality or precepts per se was going to just turn a switch on people's interest very quickly. Nevertheless, that has changed, and I hopefully something that has changed for people is not only that, of course, they have been following precepts, whether or not they know it, for many years anyway, because I have myself probably never met at least very many murderers, for example, or professional thieves, for example. So, of course, the people that we tend to see who become interested in meditation tend to be fairly upright folks, but sometimes people are brought to meditation because of having recognized in themselves very strong impulses to do harm in one way or another, and meditation is one of the things that encourages them in a wholesome direction, and they've come to appreciate that. And that said, I mean, it's not rare for monks to be offered or be asked to visit prisons, and I've even been to one a few years ago in Wisconsin, and spoke, you know, was with a group of prisoners, 30 or 40 prisoners, for I guess a couple of hours, I think. Very interesting and quite evocative couple of hours for me, and they expressed their appreciation for that. Because there is something in the human heart that where whatever it is that brings us to that state does, I think, yearn for goodness. By and large, we of course have examples in the world where that does not seem in any obvious sense to be the case, but in fact those examples are in some ways prove the case, because they, insofar as we're aware of some of the things that do occur in our world, often benighted world, it, if anything, makes us strive even more deliberately, consciously, properly towards being good and doing good in the world, being our best. And it's interesting that when people do their best gets better, because we are beings who respond to repetition. And when we practice things that are good, they little bit by little bit, they make us a little better. And after a while, if we're paying attention, we even notice that fact. So that's all very good. So I'm just talk a little bit about the precepts again, to remind some of you who haven't really thought about them for a while, but we won't maybe dwell on them too awfully long. Not that doing so is at all a bad thing. First precept, to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. First of all, intention is involved in any of these. That is, we're refraining from intentionally doing things. Sometimes, as you know, after the fact, you realize you stepped on an ant or moved in such a way that the mosquito on your arm got crushed or what have you. But those were not intentional acts. And for tiny wee creatures like mosquitoes and ants, they are often in harm's way just by the big feet of human beings and the big hands of human beings. So resolving not to intentionally kill another, and especially a human being, that would be the grossest instance. But say here at the monastery and the forest, we're surrounded by many creatures too, from deer all the way down to raccoons and skunks and of course mice and all kinds of rodents and whatnot. So we have it's a very busy place in that sense. So we have to conduct ourselves in a way that does not intentionally bring harm, and that includes introducing poison into the environment, for instance. At this level, actually, the first precept can be very inconvenient. If you think about resolving not to slap mosquitoes, for instance, it feels quite awkward sometimes, very inconvenient indeed. Or if you think of dealing with an infestation of mice, for another example. Right now, I mean, I think I mentioned at the outset that there's a rebuild of our attic space, the third story of our main building going on. And that's largely okay. The occasion is that bats by the dozen were getting in there for year in and year out, and their urine and feces accumulate, and therefore in the summers and the hot months, the heat warms things up in the attic space underneath the roofing, and it was very disagreeable. And then, of course, there's some forms of mice. I think deer mice produce. There's a very serious toxin which can be part of their urine. So people have died from it, cleaning out spaces that have been infested with mice. So it isn't just kind of mere inconvenience, but it can be a little more important to find ways to deal with these things. In our case, what we found with the bats was that we had to time the removing of the roofing and therefore the disturbing of their nest and whatnot. We had to time that with a time when they would be normally making new nests or beginning to mate and all of that. So they were ushered out from our roof space, but it was at the proper time for them anyway to find a place to nest. So and we would not have disturbed say their young and that kind of thing. So and it worked out for us because it was right at the beginning of spring, and so also a good time to start the construction. Sometimes that kind of decision is not even so convenient as it turned out for us to be, but nevertheless, we did bring the bats to mind, their welfare to mind. So yeah, gardeners and whatnot deal with this, trying to work out how to. And I think most of us know now that for instance, there are forms of gardening. I think marigolds are very good for keeping many types of bugs away, and what it is that we plant things next to, and all the rest can have a big effect. And I guess I know that there are some good remedies for that. For gardeners, we have a lot of ticks too. And as Lumpur Liam wisely observed when asked what the most dangerous animal in Thailand was, you're thinking king cobra or a tiger, of course. And he said insects, because more people die from dengue fever and malaria a year in Thailand than die certainly from poor old tigers and king cobras. So yes, our ticks are something to be reckoned with as well, and therefore taking care around that. Unfortunately, when they really dig into you and you find them, and you're of course encouraged to get them out very quickly, it's difficult. I had one recently, and I actually couldn't. I'm not so skilled with my tweezers to be able to get it out without killing it. And maybe I'll find a better way in case it happens again. But anyway, those I didn't want to kill it, but I confess, interested in ensuring that I didn't become a burden to the community by contracting Lyme disease either. So not killing. It doesn't just relate to humans, but also to all living creatures. And then the way we navigate the stuff of our life will take on varying degrees of skill as we take those things more seriously. I sometimes mention this, but for the first year in Thailand, maybe about 5 months of it was spent in a very remote hermitage, just with one other monk chiefly. And you're in the midst of thousands of acres of jungle and forest and close to the Burmese border. And it was recommended to us that we chant a certain chant, sort of spreading merit and the intention of being harmless to all the creatures that we're living with, because there really were, cobras and vipers and there was a tiger on site at one point, and bear and elephants and all of these things. And there's just one other monk. I mean, you don't have a troop of people to carry torches around with and scare animals away. You're just by yourself. Interestingly, chanting the Loving Kindness Sutta that we just did a little while ago, both in English and usually in Pali, as well as a particular chant that monks were given by the Buddha. I did this a lot, like several times each day, last thing before I went to bed and first thing when I woke up in the morning. And walking down, because it was about a 45-50-minute walk to where we took our meal, walking through the jungle and crossing this raging stream as it snaked its way down the steep mountainside. You're looking to either side all the time, because there's a type of viper that just hangs out in bamboo, and there are snakes in the ground, and on and on and on. Things make noise, and all the rest of it is very, very beautiful. And it isn't like you're just on edge and afraid all the time. In fact, it was a little different. Giving myself to those practices, using those chants, and recognizing that I was basically helpless in the face of the bigger creatures, and that it just developed over time a sense of peacefulness and kindness, really, just this active attention and intention, that I pose no harm to anything that I might pass. This is, as I say, something that I had to, but also which naturally developed in my heart and mind over a short period during that time I was there. So this isn't merely the province of monks and nuns. Lay people also, of course, encounter dangers of various sorts. So you go camping, and there are things that maybe surround you where you live. But just being able to stride forth in the world and actively cultivating a sense of peacefulness, of loving kindness towards people and beings that you're meeting. It changes the tenor of experience. Second precept. Not to take anything which isn't given. Very simple at the outset, where it sometimes might kind of feel a little snug for people. Maybe is when you're filling out your taxes, or I don't know, working for a company and making an expense claim or something. I think. Monks are sometimes, people sometimes come a little sheepishly and admit that, taking going on to some conference, and on their return, they were able to, maybe beef up the expense sheet a little bit. When the heart and mind become more sensitive to the precepts, we recognize the feeling that we get in bending, breaking the rules a little bit, or even contemplating doing so. If you've been a very upright person, and then I think it's maybe tax season, is it? maybe that's why it came up. But even contemplating, just adding a few dollars here or there, or what have you, it begins to it has an impact on the heart and mind. There's a kind of resistance, perhaps a little a frisson which one feels when one is contemplating, or sort of thinking, oh, maybe I could do this, or I could maybe get away with that. So we're not talking about shoplifting or robbing banks here, but the things which I suppose are actually still within the grasp of people in the world. So this is a precept which encourages us to be very clear about boundaries of this kind. Sexual misconduct, so to refrain from any kind of sexual misconduct. How misconduct is defined, it's understood, I think, usually that this does vary a bit. That is to say, that there are mores, there are rules, laws, and norms in any kind of social structure. So living in Canada might be different from living in Iraq, or in central China, or Latin America, or something around these sorts of things. But for us, of course, in a Canadian and generally speaking in Western European culture, this means if you have a committed relationship, man-woman, man-man, woman-woman, that behave honorably in that relationship and not seek extra sexual partners, for instance. Not to do so would typically involve lying, and that's, of course, the next precept that comes up. But there is a sense of being honorable in intimate relationships, and what it means in those relationships, that we are trustworthy, and one's partner knows that we are trustworthy in this regard. Also, of course, just being respectful in other ways, in one's sensual relations, but just speaking in terms of honoring one's partner in this sense is of utmost importance. Upholding any of these precepts, all of them together, is one of the ways that we develop a sense of, self-respect too. The shoulders sort of square a little bit when the question arises about our intentions in life, or intentions toward this or that person, or if we are generally an upright citizen or so forth, there's a sense that one can be confident in saying yes, because you know yourself. So in this sense, self-respect and just being honorable in our engagement in life in the world, our social worlds, our environments is a wonderful feeling. Actually, it's a wonderful way of carrying ourselves in the world. The fourth precept is not to intentionally lie. And the Pali here, panatipata, does refer specifically to lying. But typically when we speak about speech, we'll also talk about harsh speech, for instance, gossip, just frivolous speech, which just fills in time, makes us, feel less uncomfortable socially and that kind of thing. But especially it relates to lying in this instant. And lying, of course, can be very gross. It can also seemingly be very subtle, very just we're maybe uncomfortable admitting something publicly about our attitude towards something, or we exaggerate our intentions, our actions in the past, perhaps in a way which allows us not to admit to not being so careful about something, in fact, in the past. So it's a form of self-defense, of course. In this instance, it's a form of self-defense where we're not comfortable revealing ourselves truly. Being truthful doesn't mean we have to say everything. We're not required to divulge everything about ourselves every time we open our mouths. Because there is also time and place. There is skill, obviously, in speech, and the skill involves not simply not lying or using frivolous or harsh speech, but also saying what's appropriate, what's useful. Is it timely? So the Buddha speaks about speech, which is true and agreeable, or true and disagreeable. But if it's beneficial, he was willing to say it. But being willing to say something doesn't even mean you're going to say it at that time, because part of the skill here will involve finding the appropriate time, maybe finding a neutral space, not bringing something to someone's attention when it's in a public space, doing so privately. So in a respectful way, which honors, their sensitivities. It will also involve a recognition that maybe if it's the case of bringing up someone's something that they did, which is actually a fault, but before doing so, reflecting on yourself. Do I ever do that? Have I ever done that? Am I likely sometimes still to do that, for instance? Is it a fault, in other words, that I sometimes express? Now, if it's something you still feel you need to bring up with the person, maybe a skillful way to do it when you've found the proper time and place is begin by saying, I feel it's important for me to share something with you that I've noticed in what you've done. But first of all, I should say that I've done this before myself, and it's part of the reason that I maybe am more sensitive to this particular action or form of speech. So please recognize that I've done this myself, and I do recognize that it can bring harm. So, this would be perhaps a skillful way of bringing up a sensitive subject. Frivolous speech. As I say, I've been flipping through this book by Ajahn Pavaro and Joseph Capel, and I'm sure most of you have heard talks by Ajahn Pavaro. He's a wonderful speaker, very very brilliant mind, wonderful memory, and so forth. But he admits freely and often that he talks a lot. He has a lot to say. He has a very active mind, and that's something that has been with him from the beginning of his life. And he tells in this book a lovely story about when he was about 2. Now they had relatives in Belgium, so I think they would every year maybe travel over to Belgium, and I think a boat or a ferry or something goes to Antwerp. It looks like Antwerp is somewhat inland, but you can it's available. It has a harbor or something. So they've stopped, and there's their favorite aunt with them, and that he's 2 years old, and I guess they're about to have their dinner, and so he's put in his high chair. He hasn't said a word. Yeah, he hasn't said a word for maybe an hour or two. He's just kind of looking around. You can imagine a little child with bright eyes looking around. And the conversation has turned because they're in this harbor, and there are boats going all over Europe, and it's just a busy place, And so the conversation among the adults has turned to where are all these people going, and going to Germany and going here and here. And finally, this 2-year-old, all of a sudden, the only thing he said for hours or maybe all day, he says, "They're going to wherever the boats will take them." And they're very precocious. They're going wherever the boats are taking them. Very precocious, but something very true about that. Very, very wise, actually. In fact, because we're going wherever our paths are leading. Yeah, in a sense, and we're following whatever habits we're cultivating. Yeah. So there is something very deeply Buddhist and kind of causal. It has the ring of causality and truth in it. So that's from the 2-year-old Ajahn Pavaro. So as he says in this book, it's okay to stop too, and one thing I've observed in myself sometimes, when there's a kind of discussion and there are opinions about something, and typically these might be of a political nature or philosophical, just there are different, a group is talking about something, and then a kind of something polarizes around some subject, because some subjects are very kind of abstract, you can talk about Plato's cave or something, and although for philosophy majors that can be quite a heated subject too, I think. But of course, if we're talking about contemporary politics or world events or something, things can get very heated. And one of the tests that I have around that is because we will gravitate quite often in a polarized situation. Sometimes anger, sometimes fear will make us, make the mind turn in one direction or another, and will gravitate perhaps to one or other of the polarities. And one of the things that I look for myself is, can I not be the last person speaking? Can I not be the person who has the last word? It's a very interesting little test. Just letting things, it's okay not to say anything. So this isn't regarding frivolous speech per se, although arguments have a frivolous quality sometimes, not important. In fact, they may feel important in the moment, but oftentimes it's just kind of rehearsing opinions. Yeah, just winding ourselves up, winding others up, and then you spend the next couple of hours kind of winding down from that, if you do. Sometimes, of course, a heated argument you can take away with you, and the next day or two you can be reviving your side of the argument. I wish I should have said this, and she was wrong when she attacked me on this, because really it's this way and that way. And so yeah, speech is an extremely important precept to why? Because it's kind of halfway between the mind and physical action in a way. Yeah. Also from this book, I hadn't thought of this. Ajahn Pavaro did a kind of informal survey a bunch of the Vinaya rules that we, in the Patimokkha. So there are 227 rules, but he said, and usually it's understood that there are a few thousand rules that kind of spring out of these 227, but in his estimation, kind of a rough calculus, about 75% of them, 3/4 of all of those thousands of rules, can be broken just with speech. Quite interesting. It's it's very, very a potent kind of thought. Even say killing, for instance. I mean, a bhikkhu is no longer a bhikkhu if they praise someone dying, or if they suggest to someone that someone should be killed, and that person acts upon it. Say if a bhikkhu were to speak to a bunch of soldiers and suggest that killing was their right, and this is their duty, and good luck with it, kind of thing. And of course, the soldiers would likely, some of them would act on that, maybe in short order. Technically speaking, that bhikkhu is no longer a bhikkhu, and at the moment that a person is killed. So that's a very gross example. But in all kinds of things, speech is involved. And probably, I think if you looked at your own lives in the world, you could probably find so many ways in which speech can be used with great care, with great skill. And I'd point to, because I think all of us have examples in our lives. As I said early on, we kind of shy away from always thinking about what we can't do, and thou shalt and so forth. But think of someone, an aunt or a teacher or a monk, or any number of people, your spouse perhaps, who just has a deep practice of good speech, gentle, honest, truthful, kindly, doesn't speak too much, doesn't speak out of turn, isn't trying to get attention to, bring attention to themselves all the time, isn't wasting your time with just yattering away about this, that, and the next thing, isn't prone to being harsh or unkind in their speech, and so on and so forth. It's such a gift, yeah. And if we take examples of this kind seriously, it's a way of ennobling ourselves too. I mean, it's very good to be around people of this kind, especially if we take, or perhaps only if we actually take notice of this. So pay attention to your verbal world, your interlocutors, and I'm sure you'll find one or two people who have just, and sometimes it's the older people because they've learned it, but sometimes it's young people too. They've maybe grown up in a family where they had very clear guidelines for speech that were always followed, and by and large, they, from a fairly early age, they're living by these guidelines. It's a real blessing. It's a real noble thing. I mean, in fact, any of these precepts, the five precepts, when we ourselves are honoring them, and they are becoming, hopefully, in what I'm saying, in the examples that are coming to my mind, you can see that there are gross ways of breaking any of them, but there are more and more and more and more subtle ways as well, and the subtlety will then involve speech, and then it will involve mind, because ultimately it boils down to, as I said at the outset, the quality of our intention. So as our intentions are being refined, as our mindfulness of what it is to keep these rules and to honor them properly, and actually to strengthen them, and that we are we're you might say it's a little like living next to a really, really busy highway, 4 lanes of traffic going each way. Your house is, say your house is right on the highway, or just so initially, keeping the precepts is like just putting up a fence there and not going through that fence. Why? Because you recognize that you're gonna do yourself harm by crossing that boundary. And as the precepts become more and more refined, and our appreciation for their value becomes more refined, and therefore our intention around keeping them, nurturing them, and so forth becomes more refined, it's kind of like the house gets, we're living further and further and further away from that particular highway. We're in increasingly less danger of even getting close to breaking them eventually. Until eventually, when you think of the lives of saints, for instance, they just couldn't do it. So it's said about a Buddha or one of the Arahants, they simply are incapable of lying, for instance. Just incapable. It isn't something they have to restrain themselves from, in a really desperate circumstance. They just can't do it. And that in itself, I find that a very beautiful thing to contemplate. Having that degree where the heart is so aligned, so deeply resonant with truth and goodness and beauty. So the final of the precepts is not indulging, not taking intoxicants, not taking things which dull the mind, dull the mindfulness. And this usually, for most people in the West, is a little bit of a they feel like is a gray area. Having a bottle of beer from time to time, a little glass of wine with dinner or something like that. Yeah, the subtitle of this particular chapter in Ajahn Pavaro, Joseph Campbell's book, is "Keeping the Reptiles Fenced In," because. I mean, I've heard that something like 50% of all murders are committed by people who are under the influence of intoxicants. I think alcohol in particular. So yeah, it seems that people have difficulty saying when is enough. And if intoxicants are dulling the mind and mindfulness, then of course discerning what is enough and what is too much, what is, if there is a kind of fine line there, becomes less and less easy. And so it's a very, very tricky one for many people. It's tricky until people just say, somehow there's something very noble, there's something very honorable in just resolving to keep these five. It's just a handful of precepts. Can I keep these? Yeah, I can keep these. And yeah, it's really tough not to sort of exaggerate sometimes. So the precept on speech is difficult and so on and so forth. And I still sometimes, maybe swat a mosquito, but then I, kind of come back to that and resolve better. But and maybe with alcohol too, it's a little bit difficult to keep sometimes until you just decide to keep it. That would certainly be my recommendation. No harm will come from it. And Ajahn Amaro, because this is one chapter I kind of looked into a little bit, he gives an example. Well, I knew a woman who she was doing something or other and dislocated her knee and or camping or something. And so she told her husband, that bottle of whatever it was, rum or whiskey or something, give me that bottle. And she drank, like a pint of whiskey, and they set the knee again. And that was, so obviously, if you're going in for an operation, you're taking some sort of, you might say it's a kind of intoxicant. It makes you very drowsy and eventually might put you to sleep, but you might be very drowsy. For some of them, of course, you're going to be very just numbed, basically, and that can be very skillful. So there are times, maybe there are times when alcohol is a skillful remedy. And before there were anesthetics as we know them nowadays, of course, getting a tooth pulled, maybe a good shot of rum was the kind of thing to help with that procedure, where a piece of bone is being broken right off your jaw. So, but misusing intoxicants is the issue here. And as I say, there are, that whatever, that reptilian brain of ours at the brainstem or wherever it happens to be. I mean, we're some things that we may be unaware of and unfamiliar with, and simply not acknowledge in about our being human, maybe just waiting to take advantage of our deep intoxication, and just refraining from that may be the greatest blessing that we can offer, one of the greatest blessings. So all of this involves, I don't remember when I started, but I'm just, I guess I should wrap it up fairly soon, but all of this involves what is called Hiri and Ottappa. These are considered the two bright guardians of the world. And these are, the old definitions were moral shame and moral dread. I really like Ajahn Thanissaro's translation of Hiri and Ottappa as conscience and concern. If you've done something that was very, very harmful to someone, said something that hurt them deeply and affected your relationship for the next few years, and that, it's appropriate to think of these moments with some shame, or at least it's sort of fitting in a sense to feel ashamed sometimes for things that we have done, even things that we have intended or thought of doing or said. We're human beings, and we respond to the stresses of life in various ways, and they aren't always skillful. They haven't always been skillful. And when you're 12 or when you're 17 or something, likely you did a few things that you would not certainly do as an adult now. So it's okay to be able to reflect and yikes, what was that about? So that's having a sense of conscience. It's not making a self around that shame. It's not going back there to sort of restore our shameful nature in any way. It's not making a self out of being a person who did something like that. But it's like getting too close to a fire, Oh, that hurts. It hurts. Just as it hurts to bruise the body, there is a kind of moral body here, you might say. So we want to take care of that moral body. And then conscience is a recognition that we need to stay away. The Buddha speaks about what fibers like tendons or whatnot that are exposed to the fire. They kind of shrivel up, they shrink, they shrink away from the fire as if they're afraid of it, you might say. And so conscience and concern for our future, our present and future moral well-being. Just having a sense of appreciation for the virtue that we're cultivating, honoring it, cultivating it, and feeling and experiencing the benefits of having a kind of honorable nature that we're upholding. So these things are actually very beautiful, and from time to time, if you're not around monks and kind of formalize the taking of precepts, there's no reason that you need to formalize it in that way. Just taking them on your own from time to time, going through the list and reflecting on them, and then resolving to continue, resolving to kind of do your best again, is a very good thing. So I just commend them to you as the Buddha commended them to all of us. The five precepts are basic lay precepts for any Buddhist. And it's no small thing to say that if the world actually lived by simply these five precepts, there would be peace. There would be harmlessness in the world. There would be peace. Imagine it. Duplicity and violence, and it just wouldn't exist. I mean, they sound so simple, and yet they are utterly profound and transformative. And, if you want to know how to stop any war or whatnot, you'll never know unless you know how to remain peaceful yourself. You'll never know. You'll just have ideas. We'll just have ideas about what Russia and Ukraine should do, or whatever the next conflagration might be. We'll never have any ideas. Just ideas that we've heard and we can trot out from political theory. But when we can maintain peacefulness and honesty and honorability in our own lives, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's put under some stress, and when we're developing skill around these precepts, these are no small matters. They are to be commended and respected and honored, treasured. So I'll leave those reflections for you. And we have some time for questions. That was a little longer than I guess I normally would have taken, but good subject. And I can go on a little bit more as you wish. So it's 10 after 9 now.
If anyone online wants to ask a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand function. Anyone in the room here is free to come up and do so if they're so inclined.
First question's always the hardest.
Christine.
Oh, yes. We have a question.
Can you
unmute? Oh, Christine is first. Is Christine first? Okay.
Yes, Christine.
Have to unmute, please. Hi.
Gabrielle first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Gabrielle.
Yes, let me just get my view so I can see you. Chant Ajahn, that was a very, very beautiful teaching. And I'm not quite sure what I want to ask you, but it's in regard to the fourth precept and speech, and having done a considerable amount of harm to a sibling quite a while ago, and not having repaired that. And Yeah, I don't know if you have, because I know there is a um, kind of a ceremony, which I don't think would be appropriate in this situation of asking forgiveness, but just trying to approach this family member in a way that they would be receptive has just really been puzzling. I'm not sure. And you don't have much to go on, but if from your experience in speaking to other people who have had similar situations, do you have anything you can offer?
Well, everything begins with intention, doesn't it? And depends a lot on how we're holding something like that, some sort of pain, and it sounds like it's quite of a long-standing nature. And I think one thing I would do is remove a sense that you have to do it, because for one thing, you might not be able to do it. I guess in a way you've experienced that already, you've acknowledged that already. Because of course it requires two people to engage in this kind of way. Obviously, it requires it requires on your part a willingness and an interest to do it, to repair something that, if possible. But it also requires that openness on their part too. You can do a lot quietly, of course. Just include your sibling in your thoughts of loving kindness and so forth. Also, I think forgiveness of yourself, as you said, it in your sense, at least, it stems from something that you said. Maybe that wasn't entirely accurate, or in a sense that maybe there were two people involved and just not yourself. I'm sure that was to some extent true too, but somehow letting go springs to mind, just, okay, it isn't up to me, in other words, to fix this necessarily. That is to say, it isn't required of me. My spiritual development, my ability to be content and at peace in my life, in the world right now, does not require this particular piece to be fixed. I think getting yourself off the hook in that sense helps a little bit. And sometimes when a person feels some relief in that regard, there are invisible bonds, which strings which attach us with our siblings and our parents. And sometimes, in those, spider webs or whatever, there's a little spidey sense that a person on the other end of things picks up, and some sort of surprises occur. But whatever, what would happen if you just resolve, okay, let's say I can't say anything. Let's say I don't have the words for this, and I don't think that they're open. What can I do? And I do wish to be a good person. I'm trying to be a better person, for goodness sake. A good person trying to be better. I mean, what more can we ask of people? Any of us, ourselves or others? And the remainder of my life, I may live for another 30 years, I may live for another hour and a half, but it cannot be contingent. My peacefulness, my ability to feel just at ease in my life cannot require that there's a mosquito, hello there. It cannot require that this piece be fixed. Just, get that, work with that as long as you need to get it out of the way. I would say that. And when you're at ease, you may then, because you're ultimately probably going to be, if it ever occurs, going to be the initiator. But feeling that ease, I think, will be a big piece in your ability then to find some way of rapprochement, some words to bring to it, or not. Just realizing, oh, I've got to let this go for both of our sakes. I have to let this go. Maybe it would just be too painful for that. I don't know. Maybe you won't know, but the only way you will know or come to a clearer sense, I think, will be to become free of it in yourself. Yeah. And then if something were to arise, it's simply an opportunity to make something which is still really tender, just something which is healthy again. You're not trying to become their best buddy again. You're just okay, And I always remember too, I've done this myself with people in my life. What I keep in mind is, okay, samsara. Let's say we're Buddhist. We believe in samsara, and who do you meet in samsara, and under what circumstances, and on the rest. What can I do now, just so that if and probably when I meet this person and some other guise in some other lifetime, that I can meet them as a friend. That is, we sort of feel at ease with each other, and that'll begin right here and now with you. So it's another way of taking the pressure off of your resolving this in this lifetime as well. So maybe something in that will be useful for you. Christine.
Hi.
Hello.
I have trouble getting my head around I guess I'll call it idealism of the precepts. Like, the world's not just at all, and particularly with regard to violence and stealing. If I don't know, sending into like relativism, but it's like if a kid's going to starve and they steal something, like who's going to tell them that they shouldn't be doing that? That it's because they have obviously no chance otherwise. And that's because of us. It's not a fair world. Like, the system is set up with people that don't have a chance, and they are forced into it. And you don't have to get into the old, if you had a chance, would you kill Hitler thing? But there's lots of instances of where there's not fairness, and people have to do things that they I guess they don't have to, but there's a level of self-preservation, and which is a good thing. And if it's on the basis of just like, not I just want more, but there's people that are controlling things that I don't have a fair chance at all. How do you come to terms with that in terms of breaking precepts?
Well, these are things that we undertake for ourselves. We don't undertake them for the world. That is to say, for the starving child somewhere. We take them for ourselves, and in honoring them, it doesn't mean that we look down on people who are, as you say, under the force oppressive circumstances. Either they eat and die, or they die. As you say, we can think of all kinds of examples in which people are more or less forced simply to preserve their life or maybe their children's lives by picking apples from a tree that isn't theirs or something like that. But my words and around the precepts is towards the people in this room right now. If you're interested in keeping them, that's a good thing. But the fact that we are keeping precepts or that we honor the precepts doesn't need to mean that we have to be critical of people who are in other parts of the world, in the cities that we live in, for instance, and who have seemingly very, very few options, but to bend these things from time to time. So these are the 5 precepts aren't ideals which are imposed on the world. We undertake them ourselves. Individuals undertake them as individuals in order to cultivate goodness in themselves. We're not trying to impose them on others, or to use the precepts, our understanding of the precepts, to be critical of others. I'm not sure if, because I think we've all of these scenarios. I mean, sometimes okay, you shouldn't kill, okay, or you shouldn't lie, okay. So you're at, the Nazis come to the door, and you have a Jewish family staying with you, and what do you say when the Nazis? I guess it's a question. It's a question you can answer when it happens, but I'm struggling a little bit because this brings up the notion of karma, and karma and vipaka, cause and the fruit of karma. These are extremely large subjects to deal with. But I would say, and this is just, you could say this is an aspect of faith of mine. When we're in, if we're living a life where we're meeting every day, everywhere we turn, we're meeting obstacles, difficulties, sickness, all manner of obstacles of various sorts, including violence. A Buddhist might say, and this is not a matter for judgment, it's just an acknowledgement. If karma works, if cause and effect, do play out in the world, some of my experience is owing to, my past lives, things that I've done. And so they're coming to fruition now because this is the time for it. The conditions are right for it. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means, this is what I have to deal with right now. Similarly, if we're living, in a peaceful society, and we ourselves have enough to eat, and we've been well enough educated, and we've taken an interest in other people, and we have good friends that we admire and appreciate, and so on and so forth, and we've had maybe even fairly good health, and so on and so forth. We can also acknowledge, this to some degree is a product of good karma. These are not meant, as I say, to be judgments in either case, but just as a Buddhist, at least, they are acknowledgments of just things are like this. This is the reality of my life right now. So I guess, to use extremely difficult examples, one of the things a Buddhist could say, and one of the things that a person who sort of has a general understanding of karma might say, well, if stealing a loaf of bread, I mean, one of the first stories I remember reading as a youngster was Jean Valjean, from Les Miserables. And poor Jean Valjean ends up in prison for stealing a loaf of bread to feel Steve. Would he have two or three siblings or something? And the injustice and the horror of that kind of thing, of course, is very pressing on the mind and heart. So I guess we would say in a generic sense, well, to be living in a country of violence and conflict, or where it's almost impossible for almost anybody to just have a decent meal or all of that sort of thing, there is a karmic element. Now, what does that mean? Well, it could mean anything. But if, for instance, if you're a person who takes an interest in others, it might mean, well, I don't have much to give, but I'd like to, make these generous offerings to these people, or maybe there's some way I can help at a distance, or maybe I have to acknowledge I can't do anything about people who live in southern Sudan right now, but maybe there are ways that I can exercise some generosity right within my own neighborhood or my own city. So there are always things that we can do. Can we fix the world right now, right here and now? No, but we have a great deal to say about our own experience, and when we're making of that opportunity something of value, that value will tend to influence others, just in the way that humans are influenced by others around them, neighbors, friends, family. So I've given you a kind of long response. I really don't know whether that is helpful in any way, but that'll have to be good for tonight. That's a subject for a whole Dhamma talk, I'm sure, or probably a book.
Thank you, Ajahn Pavaro. In the name of time, I think we'll have to pause questions for now. Would you like to do a closing chant?
Yes, maybe just I think we had sharing of verses of sharing and aspiration. Is that on? Yeah.
I'll try to get that on, Ajahn.
Okay, good, thank you. So this is one of the ways that we can express our generosity to others, is just wishing them well, and if there is if we have gained some merit, which is a kind of spiritual endowment which people cultivate in things that they do and think and say, it's understood in Buddhism that this can be shared, actually. And so even before we take that that box down to the food bank or something, while we're sitting here in the evening, we can share merit with anyone whom we choose to. So here we go. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless, through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing. May all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge, and surpasses the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled.
Ajahn, if you would like to show our respect by 3 bows to work for you.
It's true.